The intellectual properties featured and discussed in this video are not owned or produced by the Senshi. All rights are reserved by the original creators. We simply want to talk about the things we love and do not intend any copyright infringement. The following is a brief account of events well in the past. It's the early 2000s. A certain Pocket Monster franchise is taking the US by storm. A Digital Monster and Card Monster series are following close behind. They've succeeded in opening America's television gates to the world of Japanese animation. Most properties are then targeted at children, even if said property wasn't intended for impressionable minds. A child sits in front of the TV, absorbing every show with spiky hair, sparkly eyes, and funny voices that graces the channels he's allowed to watch. It never crosses his mind that things have been altered for a Western audience. It never crosses his mind that these come from a country unlike his own. All he cares about are the adventures, friends, and toys employed by these highly addictive titles. That child, as you might have guessed, was me. Time passes, and I enter through the doors of elementary school. My Pocket, Digital, and Card Monsters are all still fresh in my mind, though I've made a stunning new discovery. In the drawer of my dad's desk, I find a PS2 game. The front depicts a muscular man in an orange costume, surrounded by characters who may be friend or foe. The style is familiar, yet the context is all new. I beg for permission to play the game, to which my protective mother reluctantly agrees. My first T-rated game, an arcade-style fighter packed to the brim with a colorful roster, hard-hitting music, and tons of bloody cartoon violence. My young mind is blown. Imagine my excitement and amaze when I found out there's a TV series to go along with the game, conveniently airing on Cartoon Network. I didn't know it then, but I was slowly becoming putty in Japan's hands. More time passes. I'm still an elementary school student, but I'm approaching my preteen years, and inevitably, tweeny angst is brewing inside me. A contrarian is waiting to be born, not helped by the fact that a cousin I was once close to had been lost to a growing fad. Gone were the days where we played with stuffed animals and made up stories, leaving in their place a relative who now spent her time binging episodes of shows I was unfamiliar with. Even though I had unwittingly been traveling down the same path, I was horrified, and perhaps even repulsed, to learn my cousin had been swayed by the stylish, mature embrace of a medium she referred to as anime. I was only allowed to watch whatever was broadcasted on TV, things sanitized by the butchering hands of Western business conglomerates. So how could I have known my beloved serializations of gaming, friendship, and battle were no different, more fittingly one and the same, as those which had hypnotized my kin? My aforementioned angst gave rise to jealousy and misunderstanding, and her constant attempts to get me to watch a TV-14 show about people who turn into animals when hugged only made my contrarian beliefs thrive. I swore that, no matter what, I would never fall to the depths my cousin had reached, shamelessly unaware that the seeds of Japanese entertainment had already taken root deep inside my mind. I eventually found myself at the end of my elementary run. At some point, a bully had become a friend, and this newfound acquaintance would occasionally tell me about how great a certain ninja series was. As you may understand, I was highly skeptical at first. Things were starting to play out the same as with my cousin. I initially fought off the urgings to watch a few episodes, but I ultimately gave in when I found a marathon of said show airing one night on Toonami. I took a chance, and was immediately enthralled. Just like the show I discovered through a PS2 game, this one was way edgier and more action-packed than anything else I'd ever watched. It wasn't quite as sanitized as everything else on TV, so there were still weapons, blood, and dirty humor that captivated and controlled my developing mind. Without hesitation, I added it to my list of new favorite shows, and did everything in my power to watch every last episode before I was completely satisfied. More friends, more battles, more video games, more fun. Then I became a middle school student. By then, I had already discovered manga, and was well on my way to completing my otaku transformation. It also didn't take long for me to discover the sequel series to my favorite ninja-filled franchise. This would be the first show I ever watched in Japanese with subtitles, but it definitely wouldn't be the last. I was still a long way from awakening as a purist, however, so dubs remained my preference at the time. Soon, my family ended up subscribing to this new Netflix thing. A world of possibilities were opened up. Not only could I browse and watch a whole bunch of movies and TV shows, ones I remembered fondly as well as ones I had never watched, but there was also a seemingly endless list of Japanese animation which had suddenly become available to me. My days of reliance on television hack dubs ended swiftly with the internet's vast, uncut library of anime goodies. Some of the series I consider my absolute favorites today start out as things I just happened to find while browsing this soon-to-be giant streaming service, and this was even before Netflix originals, mind you. Unfortunately, all good things tend to come with certain challenges. Middle school is nothing short of a social battleground, and I found this out the hard way when I realized anime wasn't exactly what the cool kids considered in. My Pocket Monster backpack earned me judgmental looks, and my fanboying over the ninja show made me the target of anime-hating bullies. The strangest thing I discovered at this point was there were those who liked certain Japanese shows, like the one I found through the PS2 game, but completely rejected others, like the ninja one, just because they were supposedly stupid? Even though it was very apparent that said haters had never actually tried to watch these shows and were just parroting back what they heard from others. My contrarian heart, which my cousin had brought forth, thus reacted in a thoughtless manner, leading me to clumsily disown my previous love for the Pocket Monsters and PS2 discovered martial artists, solely because I believed this would somehow turn the tables. Needless to say, it didn't, but it took a long time before I found it in my heart to set aside the trolling claims of others and welcome my old favorites back into my arms. What's worse was I had never really managed to shake my old habit of shunning the things others told me I should watch. The friend who introduced me to the ninja show was now claiming there was some Soul Reaper show, which was better than anything else he had watched. Contrarian me politely agreed to disagree, mostly because this was yet another thing my cousin had tried to force on me back in the day, and I outright ignored his suggestions until the day he moved away and I never saw him again. Ironically, I found the show he was talking about on Netflix not too long after he left, and started watching it out of curiosity, only to immediately get hooked, more so than I had ever been with a ninja show. Life is funny like that. My awkward middle school days were soon over in a flash, thrusting me into high school and leaving me once again at the bottom of the social food chain. It didn't make much difference to me, however, because I still had anime to get me through the day. Netflix continued to prove itself a worthy investment, but it wasn't until winter break of that year that it really wowed me with something I never could have expected. During one of my usual browsing sessions through the expansive list of Japanese animation, I had a fateful encounter with something I originally thought would just be another shonen franchise to add under my belt. I was wrong. Grim Reapers, living weapons, colorful visuals, gothic designs. These were all things the new show drilled into my unsuspecting eyes. I had never been so attached to a series before. I couldn't quite put my finger on it, but there was something about this title which just resonated with me. I was so impressed, in fact, that after finishing the series, I became so depressed that I almost stopped watching anime altogether. Part of me had become convinced that I'd never be able to find anything like this new discovery, so I went months without watching any new shows, and instead just let my brain digest everything I had come to witness. Though it halted my binging productivity, it also helped me birth something which would definitely shape my future interests and creativity. Let's back up a little. I'm in middle school again. I've been reading a popular book series, and one of the volumes introduces me to a game they call Monsters and Magic. It's a D&D parody that goes over my head, but that doesn't stop me from taking a liking to the open-ended nature of the game. I recall seeing something similar in a cartoon I used to watch, but that version used a maze-like board. From then on, I always tried to replicate the two games using my own rules and designs. For one reason or another, it never really worked. Back to high school. My passion for the Monsters and Magic-esque game is heartily revitalized by my burning desire to experience more of the worlds I had been introduced to by anime. This spawns a dice-based game I generically refer to as Anime Wars. The goal of the game is simple. You create a self-insert by selecting several anime powers to have at your disposal. Then you also create builds for your favorite anime characters so you can participate in turn-based, team-operated battles. You do so by rolling a die covered in symbols borrowed from a select few shows, each of which representing one of the following: a normal attack, which doesn't require MP, a magic attack, which has you spend MP to use one of your chosen powers, a power boost, which lets you roll an amount that you can add to a later attack value, defense, which lets you roll an amount to subtract from the opponent's attacks, recovery, which lets you roll an amount to add to your HP, and transformation, which usually adds a multiplier to your attack values depending on how high of a level you roll and therefore transform into. It's both simple and complex, not to mention heavily luck-based, but my brother and I played it almost religiously for a few months. Anyway, back on topic, our Anime Wars sessions helped me scratch the itch left from the show's end, and also created loads of fanfiction that I don't care to talk about here. So I soon came to a point where I was watching new anime again. For example, the following year, I took a chance on a fantasy show about gods and economics, soon becoming so invested in the main character's romance that I cemented it as my #1 favorite anime for many years to come. I actually had to seek out and read the light novels just so I could know how the story really ended, since the animated series drops the plot around volume 5 out of 17. I then find a show about an exorcist school and a half-devil boy, a show about students who fight using living clothes, and a show about Walden people fighting massive humanoid monsters. To make a long story short, it was a good period for anime. Once again, I find myself graduating. Moving from high school to college, I at some point discover an app called Crunchyroll. It's free so long as you watch things with ads, something I was already used to because of all the series I had watched on Viz's official website. Yet again, a whole new world of franchises I never knew about is opened up to me. By this point, I have sworn off dubs because of the ignorant rants a Funimation-obsessed friend of mine used to have, so an app full of subbed anime was exactly what I needed at the time. This leads to my discovery of moe, which itself leads to the development of my taste for the slice-of-life genre. I do still enjoy a good shonen series every now and again, but I start to crave down-to-earth shows just a bit more. My early college life is filled with nostalgic shows I remember fondly, even though it's only been between 2 and 4 years since I've watched them. I'm reintroduced to the concept of keeping up with new series on a weekly basis, though now I'm watching them uncut and in their original Japanese format. The experience is liberating, and I'm filled with a sense of pride for having discovered some hidden gems before most Americans even knew what they were. Crunchyroll thus becomes my main source of anime, and I wouldn't return to Netflix until they started producing their own original series and scooping up the exclusive streaming rights of others. A few semesters go by. A day comes where my brother and I are digging through my old cosplay items. We find hats, goggles, gloves, a scarf, and my newly bought mantle from the earlier discussed giant fighting show. As a joke, he puts them all on at once, and we take a picture of the hilariously mismatched creation birthed from the experiment. What was only intended to be a mindless joke ultimately leads to an intriguing idea. You see, we had both wanted to be YouTubers at various points in the past. He had his own channel ideas, and I had mine. Our concept of YouTube at this point is reviews and Let's Plays, so that's basically the type of content we had in mind. Although, both of us were too shy and self-conscious to show our faces on the internet, and our dreams eventually stagnated and died. That is, until the cosplay disaster photoshoot gets my brain working in high gear. Costumed YouTubers. Anime and game-focused videos. Bombastic personalities to draw the interest of others. Recipe for success? We weren't sure, but we seriously wanted to give it a try. We began having long, detailed talks about what we would do and say as these outrageous, masked internet dwellers. That was 2016. It's now 2020. Many things have happened since our original planning phase, and even more has happened since I first dipped my foot into the world of anime. I am an otaku. I am a creator, and this is my debut in the entertainment business. You've heard my story, but it's far from being complete, and nothing would make me happier than continuing the chapters of my life with you, dear viewer, by my side on every step of the journey. There's more anime for me to watch. There are more manga for me to read. There are more games for me to play. I have many memories I can look back on, and even more memories which are still waiting to be made. There are all of these things for me to do, and all of it is so much more fun with you. Welcome to the game of Senshi. I'm Omega, and, if you'll let me, I'll be your host.